Hi, I'm Steve Mandel. My job is I help people keep their lives together while their marriages are falling apart. Yes, I am a divorce lawyer in New York City. The most important thing that a client should have when they come to see me, they have to understand what their goals are. You have to understand what you want and what you need. Now, sometimes people come to me and say, I want custody of my child. Well, that's all well and good, but what do you mean by custody? There are two kinds of custody. There's legal custody and physical custody. Legal custody, you get to decide the issues of health, education, and general welfare. Physical custody is where the child resides. So often I'll have a dad come to me and say, I want custody, when really what that person wants is to be involved in the decision-making of the child and to have custodial time with the child. Notice, I don't say visiting time. I don't talk about visitation, because in my mind, in my world, you don't visit your kid, you raise your kid. So that's why you have parenting time. So that's the first thing, is to understand what you really want. And then it's my job to help you get that. That would be the first thing. The second thing is, if you had custody, what would be your plan? How are you going to raise this child and incorporate this child into your daily life? Who is going to be the caretaker while you are at work? Do you have support system? Do you have parents, friends, relatives? Are you going to get a full-time nanny? So that's the other thing that is really important for people to understand. Also, bring me all documents that you might have. For example, any court orders, I need to see them. I need to see if there's been a temporary order of protection issued. I need to see any financial information. I also, this is interesting, I like to see any Mother's Day, Father's Day, or birthday cards. Because I'm representing Dad, and I get and his wife, when everything was great between them, writes, "To the best father in the world, I don't know how I could live without you. Our child is so lucky to have you as a parent." And now I have the mom saying that you're Satan. Well, it's always nice to whip out that Father's Day card. Any information regarding the status quo. Who cares for the child on a daily basis? Who takes the child to the doctors? Who takes the child to school? Who does the homework with the child? Who bathes the child? Who's involved in the daily routine, the extracurricular activities? It's very important for me to understand that. I can't tell you how many times I've represented often the mom, and the dad will be on the stand. I am an involved father. I love my kid. I say, okay, who's your child's second grade teacher? And the guy goes, it's kind of like Ralph Cramden from The Honeymooners, They have no idea. Well, right away, that blows them out of the water. Who's the child's dentist, pediatrician? So it's important for them to know that. It's important for them to give me that information so I can plan and help them prepare for trial that way. The worst thing that somebody could do when they're seeking custody of their child is to move out and vacate the former marital residence, because in fact they're abandoning the child that way and giving the child to the other parent. That is not a good thing. Do not do that. The next thing that is horrible for a person to do while they're embroiled in a custody situation is criticize the other parent to the child. The courts look very unfavorably to parental alienation. That's certainly a major factor into deciding custody. And also, all things being equal, one of the main things the court is going to look at is which parent is most likely to foster a relationship with the child with the other parent. So never criticize the child to the other parent. Also, don't use the child as a messenger. If you want to say something to the other parent, do it via email, telephone, smoke signals. I don't care what you do. Just don't tell the child, tell mommy that I'm going to pick you up at such and such. Tell mommy you want to spend more time with me on Saturdays, so she should let you. Do not do that. Another horrible thing that you could do, to really hurt your chances is not complying with the court orders. When a court gives an order, it is just that. It's an order. It's not a request. It's not a directive. It is an order. You must follow it, even if you think it's unreasonable, arbitrary, and capricious. That's lawyer talk. You gotta follow it. Another thing that's the worst, that's horrible if you want to prevail in court, is lying to the court. Or even worse, I gotta tell you, lying to me, your attorney. You could lie to your mother, you could lie to your wife, you could lie to your rabbi or priest. You gotta tell your lawyer the truth. I am non-judgmental. I represent all kinds of people, and I can spin things any way you want, but only if I know the full facts. Often clients keep me on a need-to-know basis. They say, all right, you just need to know this, but they don't know what I need to know. Only I need to know. Only I know what I need to know. So you got to tell me everything. The court system in New York is evolving. It truly is. Back in the day, we had the tender years presumption, which meant that young children belong with the mom. The law now, it's gender neutral. It says it doesn't favor fathers, it doesn't favor mothers. Unfortunately, I got to tell you, it doesn't really favor always the best interests of the child. So while the law says there is no gender bias, the judges have a bias. And every judges, most of them are human beings. Most of them have their own passions and prejudice like everybody else, and they come to the bench with those. As an attorney, you have to know that. Now, that said, I have gotten custody for a man of a 2-week-old child. But of course, that was extenuating circumstances, and mom had a lot of baggage in a lot of situations. So even though the law is neutral, unfortunately, some of the judges are not. Child support in New York is statutory. It's an obligation from the non-custodial parent to the custodial parent. Here it's generally the residential parent gets the support from the non-residential parent. It is 17% for one child, 25% for 2 children, 29% for 3 children, 31% for 4 children, and 35% for 5 children or more. Now, when they compute child support, they take the gross. The only deductions really off of the gross are Social Security and New York City tax if they're paying it. Also, if they're paying support to another child, not of this marriage. But that child has to be born before the subject children. Child support in New York is to the age of 21. A lot of states are till 18. It's till 21 in New York and can be extended and is often extended by the courts till 22 if the child is in school. Now, as I said, it's mandatory up to a cap of $136,000 of combined parental income. After that, the courts have discretion. They look at the needs of the child. Every county is different. New York County will go up to about $300,000, $350,000 of combined income. Staten Island might go to $250,000. Putnam, same thing. So it depends on that. Now, child support could be adjusted every 2 years, or if there's been a significant change in circumstances of the payor. For example, if you are the mom and you're making $300,000 a year in the financial industry and you lose your job, then you could go to court and seek a downward modification because it's an unforeseen change in circumstances and it must be substantial. However, you can't just quit your job. You can't say, I'm tired of doing this. I now want to be the great American author and I'm not going to work. The courts will not let you do that. If you try to do that, the courts will impute an income to you. So even if you're not making the money, the courts could say, listen, you were making $300,000, you want to go be a painter over on the Seine, that's great. You're still going to pay child support based on that $300,000. Everybody will concede that a mother is extremely important to the raising of a child, but so is the dad. It is very important for the father, and it's truly in the best interest of the child to have 2 warm, loving, caring parents, as opposed to somebody who's just going to write a check and mail it out every week. So if you're married and you're getting divorced and the father wants to have a constant, regular relationship with the child, that could either be negotiated or the courts really will make sure that that happens through a schedule of shared parental time. Now that could be flexible, and it's the best when it's flexible, and the parties sit and talk to each other and they work things out together. If they can't, it's actually a court order, and you set forth the specific dates and times. Now unfortunately or fortunately, there's no set schedule. I can't pull something down from a textbook and say, Dad has the child every Wednesday for dinner, midweek overnight, and a Friday to Saturday, because it depends on a lot of things. It depends where the parties live. Now, if you want to have joint residential custody where the kid has two homes, that really works only if the parties are committed to it and agree to live in the same area. Because for the child, they need the stability of their home, they need the stability of their friends and their school. So we can't have Dad live in Manhattan, Mom live in Dutchess, and the kid flip back and forth. So that won't work. So it's great when you can have joint custody, but again, the parties must cooperate with each other and be committed to making it work. There's a new phenomena, for lack of a better term, called the baby mama, the baby daddy. The baby daddy has just as much rights in the situation as the baby mama or the father and the wife with respect to raising the child. The difference is the baby daddy has to be declared to be the father of the child. A child born in the marriage is presumed to be the child of the mother and the father. If the parties are not married, well then we have to establish paternity. If the baby daddy's on the birth certificate when the child is born in the hospital, well then that's signed, sealed, and delivered. Otherwise, what you have to do is go into court and either on consent enter into something called an order of affiliation where both parties say this child is mine, or if the mom is resisting it, then you have to have a paternity case. So where the blood test would be drawn, and then the man would be established to be the father. Once that happens, as Spider-Man says, with great rights come great responsibility. So the dad would have the right to see the child, be involved in the child's life, but of course at that point, the father would be obligated to pay child support. Now, as I said before, when I talk about the 17% for one child, 25 for two children, that's basic child support obligation. Over and above that, there are statutory add-ons. For example, unreimbursed medical expenses. Those are paid in proportion to the party's income. Also, as an add-on, is childcare expenses. If, for example, mom has custody, mom has to go to work, mom spends $600 a week for childcare, and mom makes $20,000, dad makes $40,000, or mom makes $200,000, dad makes $400,000, whatever, then it's a 2/3, 1/3 split. So in addition, in that case, to the basic child support of 17% for one child, dad would have to pay $400 of child care, mom $200. So that's on top of the basic child support obligation. A question that men generally ask me is, I'm not really 100% sure the child that's going to be born is mine. Should I sign the birth certificate? Well, once you sign it, you're acknowledging paternity, and the courts like to have two parents for the child. Number one, that fits the societal norms, but equally, if not more importantly, once you sign on that line that you are the father, you will be obligated to pay child support. Also, you can't sign it and raise this kid for 5 years, this kid calling you daddy, and then come forward and say, you know, now I want a blood test. Now I want to prove that this child is not mine, or see if it's mine, because that's called estoppel. You can't sit on your rights. Not only for you, but it's really not fair to the child, because this child will be bonded to you. The child will see you as the father. Then you can't go, only kidding, me and mom broke up, I want to go away and move down to North Carolina. The courts don't let you do that. So be careful for what you wish for. Once you sign that, as I always tell my clients, it's kind of like the dog who chases the car. What's he going to do when he catches the car? So if you sign that, make sure that's what you really want to do. Okay. Custody cases are the most difficult, heart-wrenching cases that could be. I mean, besides what you're going through, the parties go through, they are extremely expensive. Not only is each person paying their attorney, but the courts will often appoint an attorney for the child. It used to be called a law guardian. It's now an attorney for the child, because children will not, more often than not, come into court and testify that they want to live with mom, they want to live with dad, because that creates a whole host of problems. Number one, parents bribe their kids. Live with me, I'll buy you a puppy. Also, it's also not fair to ask the child to pick one parent or the other, because once the case is over, the child has to have a relationship with both parents. In addition, the court will often appoint a forensic evaluator. That's a psychiatrist who will examine the mother, who will examine the father, who will examine the child with the father, the child with the mother, and then come into court and testify as to the interpersonal relationships between the parties. So you can see it becomes very, very expensive. So before you go down that road, really decide what you want to do. If it's really you want extensive parenting time, or you just want to make the decisions, don't get hung up in the phrases and the titles of custody, non-custody. Think about time. Think about raising your child. Think about how are you going to be involved in your child, because that's really what it's all about. I've been a matrimonial lawyer for 34 years in New York City. And so many times, the frustrations I feel is when the system doesn't work. It doesn't work often for the men, it doesn't work for the women, and a lot of times it doesn't work for the children. The reason is the courts are overwhelmed. The courts cannot give you the time they need, and they don't have the resources. Our judges, in addition, are underpaid. They recently got their first raise in 12 years. So many people, when I started practicing, the judge was the best and smartest person in the room. Now, unfortunately, it's not, because often the brightest people could make 4 times that in private practice what they make sitting on the bench. I know a judge, a great judge, he had to leave because he has 2 kids in college. He couldn't make it on a judge's salary. So unfortunately, that's a tremendous frustration. Also, what I find very frustrating is when the client doesn't level with me. I could deal with any situation. As I said, I've been doing this a long time, but only if you tell me something. There's nothing worse than trying a case and the other side knows more about the situation, knows the skeletons in the closet, which the client hasn't divulged to me. As I said, I don't judge, I lawyer. When you come to me for your initial interview, you've got to tell me everything. I've had clients come to me who have a criminal record. I've had clients who come to me who have drug and alcohol problems. I have clients who come to me because they are currently not working, or they're working off the books because they can't find a job. We could deal with all of that. If you have a criminal record, it depends what the criminal record is for. If you were 17 years old and got picked up for smoking a joint or public indecency because you were drinking, not so horrible. If you had a drinking problem, if you tell me that before we start the case, my job is to rehabilitate you in the eyes of the court. The courts and people in general are very forgiving of people's history, people's sins. If they see that you've owned it, you've taken responsibility for yourself, and you are now doing something, and you're in a different place and time right now. If you are a raging alcoholic, well then, nobody in the world is going to give you custody. If you are not working, and you go to court and say, I'm not working, well, that should not be a determinant factor in who gets custody. We don't give it to the party who has the most money. If you're working off the books, but you're trying, that's all the courts ask you to do. If you are working off the books and you are the payor spouse, the courts will impute income to you. If you're getting paid cash and you're saying, I'm making $10,000 a year, the court doesn't buy that. You have to realize every county has a limited number of judges who handle matrimonial. It's not like you select from the full pool. So in New York County, for example, there are 4 judges. In Brooklyn, there are 4 judges who handle all the divorce cases. These judges hear it all. They know what's true. They know if somebody is trying to mislead them. So again, be honest with the court, and then the courts will be more understanding to your situation. So even if you have a criminal history, divulge it, depending on, of course, what it is, depending on when that happened. We easily forgive transgressions when you were younger. The Mandel law firm is based around the quote of J.P. Morgan, which says, I don't want a lawyer to tell me what I can't do. I hire him to do what I want to do. That's what we do. When you come to us, your problems become our problems. What we do is we always prepare for war, but we hope for peace. Now, I believe in the rule of thirds. 1/3 of the cases, I'm going to win no matter what I do. 1/3 of the cases, unfortunately, we're going to lose no matter what we do. It's that middle third, the lawyer who cares more, who works harder, the people who work together as a team, lawyer and client, that's who's going to win that middle third. I had a client who's very well known who said to me once, Steve, I don't know if you're smarter than any other lawyer I've ever hired, but I know for sure that you care more and you work harder. And I'll take that, because really, you're in this together. You've got to work together. You've got to be dedicated. You don't start the process unless you're willing to see it through. You don't start a custody case unless you say, this is my soul, this is my life. I will do anything possible to have my child with me. My clients basically live in my office, and we work together. And then I've got to say, my first client ever, when I started 32 years ago, it was a gentleman in the Bronx. I got him custody of his 3 young children. And the reason I got the case back then is because no other lawyer would take it. Because you're saying, a dad getting custody of 3 young children 32 years ago is actually, that just didn't happen. But we did it, and it changed the people's lives. You don't realize when you're fighting today how it's going to impact your children and your grandchildren. Like if you happen to look on my website, you'll see a man, he's 32 years old. No, he's actually probably 38 years old. He was the child in that custody case 32 years ago. And he talks about how by his dad getting custody of him, how it changed his life. And it made him a better man. He now owns 3 restaurants. He's doing phenomenally. It also made him a better father to his children. So think about it. Way back then, when I was this young lawyer, if I wasn't able to get his dad the custody, this gentleman would not be the man he is, and his children would not be who they are today, and the kids are excelling. So when people come to me, I really accept it as an honor and a great responsibility. I take every case very seriously, because I realize what I'm doing now is going to affect future generations. So when you pick an attorney, you got to pick somebody who you have some kind of relationship with, because during the litigation, I'm your best friend.